Hello and welcome to the C3 Method Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how our macronutrients impact our aesthetics. In our last podcast, we talked about three types of nutrition. There's health nutrition, performance nutrition, and aesthetic nutrition. As part of our nutrition coaching system, our nutrition coaching certification, we do teach the participants all three sections. And in last episode, I got a couple responses and people were interested to hear more about the aesthetic nutrition component. So that's what I wanted to cover in today's podcast. We're going to look at protein, fats, and carbohydrates and how our amount of those nutrients can impact the way we look. We're going to look through the lens of assuming that our total caloric intake is controlled. So when we talk about having too much, say too much protein, too much carbs, or too much fats, it's not too much in the sense of creating a caloric excess that we don't want. We're going to be looking at it more as in too much in regards to the percentage of our total caloric intake. So it's really important because that frames a lot of what we're going to talk about, and without that frame, a lot of what we're going to talk about won't make sense. So again, we're going to be looking at it through the lens that our total caloric intake is controlled where we want it. So if you're looking for fat loss, you're going to be in a controlled deficit. If you're looking for body composition change, meaning you're okay with your quote unquote weight, you just want to build muscle, lose fat, you're going to be eating around maintenance calories, maybe a little bit more on training days, a little bit less on non-training days. And then if you're wanting to build muscle and allow some, maybe the minimalist amount as possible, but some fat gain, meaning our weight is going to go up over time, then we're going to be in a controlled caloric surplus. So for everybody, we're going to talk about client examples and the general advice, the general kind of just what you're going to see if you do this kind of statements. They're all framed around that we have a control over our total caloric intake and it's where we want it to be. The first nutrient I want to look at is protein. If somebody is under eating protein, there's going to be a lot of what they're going to feel, and that's a little bit different than the way they're going to look. If we look at, if we consider the way they look, so if we look at the way they look, we're going to see basically just underdevelopment. I have client examples of this where if you look at what a person is doing calorie-wise, it seems to make sense. If we look at the way in which they're training, that can seem to make sense, but they just don't have the amount of muscle that we would expect. And maybe they also have a little bit of softness compared to what we'd expect as well. Now, the softness is going to come from a combination of maybe a few elements in place, where maybe they're under eating carbohydrates. But if somebody is under consuming protein, they're not going to be developing the muscle tissue that their caloric total intake and their activity might warrant. So you'd look at them and say, man, it looks like they're eating enough. It looks like they're training enough. They just don't seem to be getting any bigger if we look at their rate of change over the past X number of months. And that would be why, is they're just under eating the material that our body uses to build muscle. You can't build a brick house without bricks. You can't build muscle without protein. And so that is essentially what we're going to see aesthetically, is there just seems to be a mismatch between what we're seeing in regards to growth, but the calories and the efforts in the gym. Now, there are different genetic responses. So not everybody's going to grow at the same rate. Maybe that person just has a low genetic response. They might say, oh, I'm a hard gainer. But if you look at it and they're under eating their protein and you start getting them up into what's an appropriate and optimal range, their growth might increase. Maybe they just never actually ate enough protein. We have tons and tons of examples where somebody was maybe only eating 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight in protein. Definitely wasn't enough for how much they were training, for maybe how large they were. We bumped that up to 1, even to 1.2 grams. Sometimes we've gone even higher than that. And then all of a sudden they start to grow and their body responds a lot better. So the general range you would typically hear is 0.6 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. It's an enormous range, borderline useless because of how large it is. But if a person isn't lifting weights often or at all, 0.6 makes sense because they're not creating a lot of muscle damage. But if a person's lifting 5, 6, 7 days a week, they are creating an enormous amount of muscle stress. Let's look at it that way. An enormous amount of muscle stress. They're also creating this huge potential in body response to build new muscle. Therefore, we want more protein. We want enough protein to cover their high level of muscle stress that they're creating through their weight training, but then also the protein that we would want to be able to add to that existing tissue that needs to be repaired, but actually add new tissue. It's not uncommon. I've had clients, myself included, where I've had to go well over 1 gram per pound of body weight to get a good body response. I've actually done diets where I've sustained over 300 grams of protein a day for months on end. I did a diet once where I did 400 grams of protein for 30 days in a row. I've played around a lot with it. And what I find is I usually train between 5 to 7 days a week. Almost always it's 7 days a week. I might miss one day a week here or there. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm a little beat up. Maybe we're going on some kind of major event and I just don't feel like squeezing it in if I don't want to. So usually it's going to be 6 to 7 days a week. I find for me, I'm currently 250 pounds and I tend to feel best if I'm consuming around 350 to 400 grams of protein. And that's even within a calorie controlled diet. Like right now I'm dieting to lose body fat. So I'm eating around 2,500 calories a day. And in the 2,500 calories a day, I'll still actually get 350 to 400 grams of protein. It's a ridiculously high protein percentage. People are going to say that that's dumb, and it would be reasonable to even question if I was actually telling you the truth. But I am telling you the truth. And it's a really, really, really high protein percentage. But I feel better doing it that way. When I swap out some of those protein calories for carbohydrates or fats, I don't tend to recover as well. I have more aches and pains in my elbows, my shoulders. My muscles feel a little more twingy, even though I want to recover and train them more often. So I tend to train my muscles on a push-pull legs sequence. Every time I come around to push, I prioritize maybe a little more chest versus shoulders or vice versa. When I'm doing my pull work right now, I'm really hammering the dead center, the middle of my back, not doing a lot of lat work, but I've gone back and forth between that from time to time. So I like to train on a push-pull legs sequence, and at 350 to 400 grams of protein a day, I can do that even at only a 2,500 calorie intake, which would be considered a deficit and pretty low for my body size. Finding that weird combination took years and years and years, and it changes ever so slightly, little bits here and there as my body develops and it grows over time. So that's not always a 100% consistent, but that's where I'm at right now. Now, I've had clients who grew very well at even just like 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So to make math easy, let's say they were 200 pound body weight. They were only eating maybe 160 grams of protein. They looked great. They felt great. They had great energy in their workouts. They were recovering well. And that seemed to work really well for them. But as I said, we've had clients that needed up to 1.2 or even above that. And that tends to be the quote unquote sweet spot for them. But that's aesthetically what we tend to see with protein is if you're under eating it, you're just not going to be developing as fast as you would expect given the calorie intake and the work ethic, even the work quality. If a person has really good technique and you're like, man, they're great technique, great mind-muscle connection, everything seems to be correct, they're just not growing well. And that might be because their protein is too low. So you can play around with the increase in protein to see if that helps. Now, what happens if somebody's having too much protein? Usually that's going to be an experiential factor, not going to be something that you see. What you might see from it is a little bit of gut distension or bloating. They're eating more protein than what their body can comfortably process, so they're going to feel uncomfortable in their digestive system. That might show itself by having their belly protruding out a little bit more than what you'd want or expect or what was normal. So maybe they recently increased their protein, they started to see a little bit more abdominal distension, a little more gas, a little more bloating, and you might find find, oh, okay, maybe our protein is a bit too high. Now, there's a lot of other things you can factor into that. Are they drinking enough fluids? So you would want to look at hydration levels. You could also look at fiber. Are they consuming enough fiber in their diet? Maybe to make room for the extra protein, they dropped all their vegetables, and that's going to cause some digestive issues. There's often a myriad of things that can be involved when we change one element, other things change. So you have to look at sometimes those other things rather than just changing that one element. I don't like this response. Then you pull it right back out. So maybe you made that change, and in that change, a few other things changed. So such as maybe their hydration went down and their fiber went down. Well, look at those components too, adjust those, and then maybe all of a sudden that protein response corrects itself and their rate of muscle growth does increase. So you don't want to just change one element, and if you get negative responses, pull that right back out. You want to look at all the other elements that might be related. So with protein, that's going to be the aesthetic component. Now, there's a ton of what they're going to feel. So I do understand that. There's going to be changes. For example, if somebody eats a lot more protein than what they were typically doing, they're going to feel fuller between their meals. So therefore, they might not feel as hungry for each meal. They're going to then struggle to eat their target calories. So there's a lot of experiential things, but I don't want to deep dive too much into that because we have enough to cover with just simple aesthetic responses. So maybe I'll come back to that stuff and talk more about experiences with these macronutrient changes in a future podcast. So that covers protein for us. Now, the next one I want to look at is fats. I know everybody's probably going to be waiting for me to talk about carbs, so I'm holding off on that one to the last. But when we look at fats, if somebody's not eating enough fats, what you'll see is usually it's very, very slow, and it's going to be hard to kind of pull this out and understand that this might, it's rarely the only element that's causing it, but you're going to see roughness in their skin, kind of a dry scaliness in their skin. Their skin's going to look older than what their age would suggest, or maybe there's just some variance over the last couple months that seems to be kind of a faster rate of skin quality degradation than what you would expect. So maybe they recently started a contest prep diet, and maybe 2-3 months into it, so 8 to 12 weeks into it, their skin is really dry, they're ashy, they're having just flakes and other issues. That can be related to low fat intake. They'll also experience dry eyes. So their eyes will be very dry, and they'll have to use a lot of eye drops. They'll talk about that being an issue. Maybe their eyes feel scratchy. That would be something that might show up as well. So those are kind of the two. You're also going to see change in hair quality. That can be another thing that can show up if they have low fat intake. Those are usually the things you would see, but they're such slow developers, it's hard to identify that. So for example, you would make this nutrition change that maybe brings your fat down too low, but you're not going to see the hair change, the skin change. You're not going to see those changes for weeks until they show up, and then it's hard to connect that that's what it was something you did weeks and weeks and weeks ago. But those are aesthetically what we would see when our fat intake drops too low, is a change in our hair, our skin, so those types of reactions. Now, when our fat intake is too high, you're going to experience usually digestive stress. They're going to be consuming a lot of fat in their meals. Their body's going to have a hard time breaking all of that down. So they can experience constipation, or on the inverse, they could actually experience diarrhea, and that would actually depend on their fluid intake as well. So if they increase their fats, but they're not drinking a lot of fluid, they're more likely to experience constipation. If they're increasing their fats, but they're drinking a lot of fluid, that's going to allow the food to pass through them, and if the body isn't able to produce enough bile and break everything down that it wants to do in the digestive tract, there's just too much in there, and the fluid is helping to kind of push it through, they're going to then run into some diarrhea or not fully digested food. You would see that as a part of the response as well. So that's the main response you would see from too high a fat intake, is digestive stress. Now, they're also going to have experiential factors such as lack of hunger probably, whereas sometimes that actually inversely happens. It depends on the calorie intake. If they're at maintenance calories or a calorie surplus, they're probably just going to say, I'm not hungry enough for my next meal, because they're still processing the last meal from the high fat intake. If they're in a calorie deficit, they might actually still experience hunger, and that actually might be worse because they're having a high fat content meal, but that's going to be a low volume of food. So they're going to report feeling kind of like emptied and wanting to eat again sooner than their next meal should allow, based on their meal frequency and total calories, because the food volume in that meal was actually just so low because it was mostly predominantly fats. Again, that's a feeling thing, but I like to throw that in there just a little bit, so that way you have an idea that that stuff does happen if your fat intake is too high. Now, when your fat intake is correct, you're just going to see not those things. So there isn't like a thing that would be like, oh, I see this, I know it's correct. It's more like, I don't see those things, therefore it must be correct. Now you can get blood work done and see if your fat soluble vitamin levels are all proper and lipids and all these things. But what you would see is just a lack of any problem. They're not going to have gut issues. They're not going to have the skin issues, the hair issues. They're going to look healthy in relation to what fat intake can impact the quality of the health of, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. And then the nutrient we probably all really want to hear more about is carbohydrates. Each of these nutrients have their own nuances to how intricate they can be and how they can have their own degree of impact on aesthetics. So I would hesitate to say, carbs is the one that, matters the most. I definitely don't want to say that. Protein matters as much, and so does fats. It's just people tend to see and feel their relationship to carbohydrate intake more clearly, and they have more connection with it than typically their protein and fat intake. Somebody can chronically undereat protein and they're going to say like, oh, I never knew. They'll chronically undereat or overeat fats and just say, oh yeah, my belly was frustrated with me every now and then, but I didn't really know why. So one example would be like a ketogenic style diet. Somebody might switch to a ketogenic diet where they cut out all carbs, but they're eating so many damn fats now that if they're not tracking calories, they might just be overeating their calories, eating a ton of fats, and they're, say like, oh man, every night when I have XYZ, I get gassy and I have, bathroom issues. And that could be related to the fact they're just having trouble breaking down that much fat. Fats and proteins are important. They do have an impact, but where most people are going to feel connected, where most people are going to want to learn more about is specifically carbohydrates. Now, too low of carbohydrates, absolutely 100% is a thing. Too high of carbohydrates, and again, remember this is within context that your total calories are controlled. So if you're having too low of carbohydrates, that means that you're having some combination or isolation of too high of protein and or fats. Now, if you're having too high of carbohydrates, then you're having in some combination too low of protein and or fats. So it does kind of push and play. If we have fats and protein in place, we're likely going to then have carbohydrates in place. If we have carbohydrates out of place, likely one or two of the other elements are out of place. Just worth noting. If my carbohydrate intake is too low, what we tend to see is that the person is soft in their appearance. Now again, if their calories are controlled, their weight isn't going to be dropping excessively fast, and then they would know, oh man, I'm under eating my carbohydrates. Maybe they're eating enough fats and protein in combination with the carbohydrates they're having, where their weight is kind of sustaining, but their performance is kind of crap. They're soft. They don't have this muscle definition. They don't have muscle fullness. I see this quite often with personal trainers who are afraid of gaining excessive body fat, but they're very active, especially the group trainers who maybe teach a few group classes a day. So they have a couple group classes they're active in, plus their own weight training, but they don't want to gain body fat. So they tend to undereat carbohydrates and they have this soft appearance. And they'd be like, I don't understand it. I'm in the gym all day. eat well, and what they mean by that is they're controlling their calories and they're eating what they consider to be healthy food options, but their carbohydrates are too low, so they're going to be soft in appearance, and they just won't understand why they don't look better given the fact that they quote unquote eat healthy and they're in the gym all day. Another crowd that I see for this is CrossFit. They tend to under-eat carbohydrates for how active they are. And even if their calories are close enough that they're not seeing a significant weight drop, their performance is trash, their aesthetics are kind of trash, meaning they're at an okay body weight, but they're really soft. They have a little bit of pudge in their lower belly, a little bit of muffin top things going on in the lower back. They're just soft. Maybe they have if they wear tight shorts, their inner thighs are gonna have a little more pudge and water retention than what they'd want. They're just not going to look the way that they think they should, given the quality of their eating and how active they are. So that's typically what you'll see with low carbohydrates is they're going to experience low performance, they're going to experience fatigue, maybe they don't even realize that, so they just think that's the way they perform and their body doesn't respond well, or they're jacking themselves up on a ton of caffeine and that's kind of masking things. But that softness that can't really be explained given the way they eat and the way they train, that's going to be related to carbohydrates intake being too low. So that's similar in a sense to when we said protein was too low. For the person, they're going to say, I'm eating this quote unquote healthy or this well or this controlled, this proper or whatever, however they want to explain it. They're eating quote unquote properly and they're training really hard, but they're not seeing the growth. With carbohydrates, what they would see is maybe their goal isn't muscle growth, their goal is performance or body composition. So they're not expecting to see bigger muscles. So that glaring, missing element isn't showing for them because they're not really tracking muscle growth. Maybe they're tracking performance and they're just seeing, wow, my performance is kind of flatlined, I've plateaued for a while, or I'm even starting to go down a little bit. My body looks and feels soft. They often then confuse that with feeling fat. And then they bring their calories down, which then brings everything down, including their carbohydrates down even more, and it perpetually makes everything worse. So one of the ways we would identify that is, well, if you dropped your calories and everything of course went to crap and you didn't lose maybe you lost a little bit of weight but they didn't lose body fat, meaning they're not looking leaner, they're not looking more defined, then you weren't having too many calories. We just actually weren't having enough carbohydrates in our calories. A quick easy way of thinking of that, there's a ton of caveats to what I'm about to say. But if you take your body weight times it by 13, that would be a ballpark of where your calories should be. If you're in CrossFit or a group trainer, you're probably more at body weight times 15 is where your calories should be. So if you're at body weight times 10 right now, and your carbohydrate intake is low, going even lower with total calories is not going to help. What you'll notice is your energy is crap, your mood's crap. If you're a female, you might even start to lose your period. You're just going to look softer, feel softer. Nothing really is going to improve. Everything's just going to get worse. So then your next step isn't to bring the calories down even more. It would actually be to look at your percentage of total carbohydrate intake and try to bump that up. Now, since I just mentioned percentage, I do want to cover that real fast. Then we're going to come back and talk about carbohydrates if they're too much. But if we consider the percentage, what I usually set clients up with is protein is 25 to 33% of their total calorie intake. Where within that range depends on their activity level, the amount of weight training they do, how intense their weight training is, how good are they at weight training, how much is total volume, frequency, all that. We also look at just general activity levels, and then what's their goal. Is their goal to lose body fat? Is their goal to build muscle, performance? All those elements factor into where are they going to be within the range of 25 to 33%. But that's usually where we put their total calories, is somewhere in that percentage range. Then for carbohydrates and fats, it's anything that's left over. So for the ease of math, let's say that we're doing protein at 25%. That means 75% of the remaining calories can come from any distribution of carbs and fats that they want. Is it going to be best for them to be, 100% carbs and 0% fat out of the excess, the remaining calories? No. Usually one extreme is not great, being mostly fats or mostly carbs or the lowest amount of carbs or lowest amount of fats. Usually not going to be that great. The reason why I leave it up to the individual and we actually tweak it depending on the individual is everybody responds a little bit differently to carbs versus fats. Some people tend to perform better and feel better with a higher percentage of carbohydrates, but other people don't. I just got off the phone, actually, well, not a phone, a Google Meets consultation with a client who does higher fat content, and he feels great on fat content. It gives him good brain focus, he said. He feels like clean in his digestive system. Whenever he puts in carbohydrates, even in controlled ways, he tends to feel more sluggish. We have other athletes where they're way more favorable into carbohydrates. So maybe out of the total carb and fat-based calories that are allocated for them per day once you remove protein calories, maybe they're 75% carbohydrate intake out of that component, and they're feeling amazing, looking great, feeling great, everything's great. So why would we change that? That's also why I don't predetermine it. I might have one client who responds well with predominantly carbohydrates, another one predominantly fats. Why in the world would I force one versus the other if it really doesn't make a difference in their overall outcome? In the sense that if we want to control body weight, we're controlling total calories and then protein within those total calories. The amount of carbohydrates or fats within that diet makes no difference whatsoever for controlling total body weight, whether we're trying to bring the body weight down, keep it the same, or push it up. So you don't need to do a low-carb diet to lose body fat. That's completely irrelevant, not necessary. As long as you're controlling total calories and protein and you're driving the calories down below maintenance for a sustained period of time, they're going to lose body fat. Okay. So that gives you an idea of percentages, is that protein is 25 to 33% of total calories. The remaining calories come from some breakdown of fats and carbs depending on that individual's preference. So we talked about what happens if carbohydrates are too low. What now if carbohydrates are too high? So if we're looking at the world of percentages, since I just mentioned that, is if their percentage of carbohydrate is really high, say it's 80% of their total diet, which definitely means they're not having enough protein and clearly not enough fats. One of the things they're going to see in that is usually you're going to see a high degree of fluctuation of water retention. So they're going to have some days where they feel flat and fat, some days where they feel bloated and like marshmallow and everything's puffy, their skin is really puffy, their pants are tight to button, nothing feels good, they just feel like they have this suit of puff on them, like they're swollen, like they got stung by a bee and their body's swollen up. Not in a good way, like swole, like that, like jacked bodybuilders talk about. They're going to be soft, kind of swollen. You'll see a really high fluctuation. And that's often because their carbohydrate intake is changing a little bit from day to day. The sodium intake is going to change, their hydration is going to change, how much water they use, whether there's an active day, a non-active day, that's going to make a big difference as well. So you see just more craziness happening with water retention and softness and how tight their clothes are going to feel is when carbohydrate intake is too high in regards to the percentage of their total overall intake. That's one of the biggest red flags. Another thing is more experiential, but they're going to have really highs and lows of like energy and hunger cravings. So they're going to be super hungry, they're going to eat some food, feel fine, then all of a sudden be super hungry again, eat some food, feel fine. And that's because of its high amounts of carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, their body's breaking that down very quickly, and then all of a sudden it's emptied out and it needs more energy again, needs more fuel. So I think we went through that. That was probably too fast, and I'm sure I could slow down and take my time and kind of really deep dive into a bunch of nuances within this. But I wanted to cover it since people had asked about that, and then open it up for people to ask any further questions or more detailed questions if you'd like. Maybe I can do a little bit of a Q&A in an upcoming podcast if people have specific questions. If you want to share your example and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling, is this correct? I'd be happy to break that down and kind of talk about that in an upcoming podcast. So what we eat does impact how we look. That's why aesthetic nutrition is one of the categories of overall nutrition that we talk about and what we teach in our nutrition coaching certification. So our certification covers health nutrition, performance nutrition, aesthetic nutrition. We talk about how to set up calories for yourself or clients. The coaching system is set up for people to be able to coach other people, but you can obviously coach yourself using it if you'd like. But you're going to set up total calories, protein, talk about distribution and timing of carbohydrates and fats as well as protein. We also go through, we talk about how to build meals properly depending on what you're doing or wanting to get from that meal or what you're doing around that meal. We then cover supplements. We cover marketing actually for the service as well. So if you're adding the service to an existing business or you're just, that's the business you want to be in, we talk about how to market that. And along with all of it, it's a talk one-on-one. So it's not read a book, take a test. You're literally going to talk with me in a virtual setting. We're going to talk. I usually use Google Meets or Zoom, or we've used Riverside before, one of those 4 million platforms out there. And we just talk. I teach you through the document. We talk through things. You ask any questions that we can personalize everything as we go. It also includes 3 months support. So after we go through all the information, you start implementing it with clients, I'll be there. You can just shoot me a message, WhatsApp, every day. I answer my messages by the end of the day and make sure you get help. And you have that for 3 months. So you have me in your back pocket for 3 months to help you, as you're implementing the service, understand small nuances and learn how to apply this in individual client or customer-based situations. I think that's it. I mean, there's tons of benefits from it. So the fact that it includes marketing is something that's unique as well from other nutrition coaching certifications. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to us on whatever platform you're on now. Just put a comment in whatever comment section there is, or you can send us a message at our website, which is c3method.com. The 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so it's C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are basically the main ones. I don't do some of the other ones. I'm busy enough doing those 3. So if you need anything, find a way to reach out or reach out to us on our website. I appreciate you listening. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. And I hope that whatever you need, you let me know so I can help you back in return. I appreciate your support, and I want you to always feel supported as well. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching.